I'm Primal Piggy. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast. Subspace is one of the things you might encounter, but don't know anything about it if you don't do your research first. You might have to be in the BDSM lifestyle long to hear the phrase subspace. But what exactly does it mean? Subspace is a mindset that submissives may get into when in a scene. And a scene is a limited time frame, play scenario. When you're doing some kind of kink or some series of kinks, you'll see why this happens sometimes and not others as we unfold this. Subspace is often compared to something like a runner's high, a feeling of euphoria that runners and other athletes experience during an intense workout. Similar sense of euphoria may occur during subspace, but it's not the only symptom. You may experience a loss of time, a less of a sensation of pain, a loss of coordination, an inability to articulate, possibly an inability to speak, and decreased mental clarity. Now, the symptoms might sound a little concerning. You may be asking, is it safe? Why does it happen? Well, remember that we mentioned subspace doesn't always happen. It may happen for some submissives and not others. It may happen during some scenes and not during others. You can understand why this happens when you understand the cause of subspace, which is hormones. Your body creates hormones all the time. We all have them in our bodies. They're necessary for our bodies to function. When your hormones are out of balance, you can run into all sorts of problems, things like weight gain or weight loss. And this can happen for seemingly unrelated reasons, like when you have a cancerous tumor. But much of the time, hormones work right. And oftentimes they work, they're very helpful. Your particular hormone makeup or balance may affect your ability to enter into subspace, but hormones are actually the cause of subspace. When you're receiving a spanking, for example, or you're otherwise in an intense scene, maybe it's bondage or something else, your body might interpret it as trauma and kick off the biological responses of fight or flight, meaning your body starts to produce the chemicals of fight or flight. You might remember the fight or flight response as your body's reaction to stress. Your body will have a physiological reaction to stress, not a mental reaction. This isn't you actually fighting or actually wanting to run. It's the way your body reacts physiologically. Although you might be pretty stoked for a BDSM scene, your body still perceives being on the receiving end as stress and acts accordingly. There's also a correlation to the stress that a dominant is under while performing a kink and can likewise be similar to subspace and be what they call dom space or top space. So it's not just, there is stress related to performing a scene on both sides of the slash, both a top and a bottom. Your body still perceives receiving the stress and it acts accordingly. This process starts with your central nervous system, which puts everything on high alert. Your adrenal cortex steps up and releases all sorts of stress hormones. Two of these hormones are adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, and cortisol, a glucocorticoid hormone that has been shown to remain elevated throughout an intense ritual scene like BDSM, but trails off after the scene ends. After this initial kick, your heart will beat faster and you'll have more energy, and that's the adrenaline. Cortisol gets your body ready to repair itself. which is useful both in a BDSM scene and in times of emergencies, while suppressing non essential systems such as the digestive system and the reproductive system. This is followed by activity from your thyroid gland, which is responsible for regulating multiple uh, metabolic processes in your body, appetite being one of them. One of the reasons many submissives end scenes feeling hungry or thirsty. All the while, breathing becomes more rapid and your tissues fill with more oxygenated blood. Activates endorphins, the class of chemicals that are responsible for the euphoric feeling during scenes or even a long run. They also reduce pain, another hormone within the uh, group is activated. These chemicals reduce the sensations of pain, though some studies still have trouble finding evidence of this. Finally, we have dopamine, a hormone that's typically associated with pleasure. And while you might experience a dopamine rush as you anticipate a reward, certain types of pain can also stimulate dopamine production. So now you know that there are chemicals that are going on physiologically in your body. If you have any sorts of disorders with the production or the use of any of these chemicals, it can change the way that you respond within BDSM scenes, and you may have to adjust accordingly to certain kinks. Or maybe things that you can't do or can't do much of that others are able to do because your body responds physiologically differently. So just make a note of that. And as you're experimenting, be risk aware and be aware that your body may just not do the same things or respond the same way as others. So, like we've mentioned, differs between people and even scenes, which makes it difficult to describe accurately. Many people characterize subspace by its floaty feeling. Others might describe this as a sense of detachment, even going so far as to call it an out of body or an astral experience. You might still be getting paddled, but you might feel very little of it or nothing at all. It might feel like a haze or a trance, similar to something like alcohol or certain drugs. You might have difficulty controlling or moving your body, and this can affect your ability to speak. And losing perception of time is common. It's also shared with a mindset known as flow. Flow is a mental state that occurs when you're deeply invested in your current activity that may aid learning. If you have ADHD or attention deficit in some way, this may be different for you. So if you're familiar with the rules of BDSM safety, that is being risk aware, being consensual, just knowing what is good to do and what's not good to do. Your partner can't always tell if you're receiving too much stimulation and need to stop or pause. So you use your safe word and let your partner know. Yet subspace can disrupt the practice of using a safe word in a few ways. For starters, you might be unaware of how much pain you're taking, so you don't necessarily think to use it. You might forget your safe word or even the entire practice of speaking ig- or doing anything if you're in a deep subspace. Um, you may recall that you need to use your safe word, but you may not be able to articulate it so that your partner can respond. Any of these things can lead to intense play that leaves you physically sore or emotionally distressed. And that's why it's so crucial for the partner who's on top or is doing or is giving to pay close attention to the bottom during a scene. In fact, some tops avoid subspace altogether, or at least during any kind of public scenes. You may also want to avoid subspace to ensure that your partner feels every whack, thud, or slap. And you should discuss whether subspace is something that you want, um, and something you should discuss how to handle. You may not want to play after subspace kicks in. That may subspace may stop the scene. I'm Primal Piggy. Thank you for joining me for this BDSM United podcast where we talked about subspace. You can find all of our resources at www.bdsmunited.com. It was a joy speaking with you today, and I'll talk with you again soon.